It's 92 degrees in Boston, 94 tomorrow. Mike Seidel, we're running a long streak of above 80-degree temperatures for highs in Boston. I think we're going to break the all-time record there.
Yes, and we need the rainfall. Let's go to the Drought Monitor. You can see how bad it is here along the northeast coast and in the interior, from Long Island up into Boston, where we're down over 9 inches of rain. The eastern half where we are is in a severe drought. We want to bring in Mark Duffy of the great Brook Dairy. He's the operator, and the drought has impacted how you feed your over 200 head of cattle.
Correct. These animals each are eating over 120 pounds of food a day. So what we're doing is we have a nutritionist, we have a veterinarian. We're feeding byproducts, apple pumice from making apple juice and hard cider, brewer's grain from making beer, canola from making canola oil, in addition to what little feed we can produce.
Yeah, you're not producing as much feed because of the drought, the corn.
Correct.
And you're also having to buy hay.
Correct. We're buying hay from out of state because, as you say, it's very tight in this state.
So that's increasing your overall cost in feeding. And that eventually feeds back in the cost of the milk?
Well, what it is milk's still a fantastic deal. It hurts me on my side, my cost of producing milk. Feeding cows is my #1 cost. Okay. And when I got to go out, in addition to the cost of raising my own.
Okay, Mark.
Yeah.
We'll get back to you. We're going to come back to the dairy farm. We've got so many things to talk about, how this dry weather and heat affecting the feeding and the cattle themselves producing milk. Stay with us.
And speaking of the heat, we join Mike Seidel live in Carlisle, Massachusetts, where it's all about the heat, but also about the drought. Mike?
It is. We're here at the Brook Dairy Farm once again, back with Mark Duffy. Thanks for having us out here.
My pleasure.
And your herd of cattle. These are dairy cattle.
Correct.
And some of them like to be scratched.
Absolutely.
Some of them aren't as friendly. They like to back off.
They're taken care of by humans, and they really respect that. They're a great animal to work with.
What gets me is the fact that they eat 125 pounds of food a day, and that is a lot of food to put in here, and it costs a lot of money, and the drought is impacting your bottom line.
Absolutely. We like to raise as much as we can, and then buy vitamin minerals to get that balanced diet, working with our nutritionist. But when things don't grow, we have to find a way the cows have to eat.
How about the heat today? Our heat index is already over 90. We've got fans blowing in here. How do the cows deal with the heat? Because they don't sweat.
Right. They don't sweat, but, we try to make the barn. There's no walls on the barn in the summertime. We try to keep the air flowing as much as possible. And so cow comfort is #1, okay? But they really need the night. The coolness of the night with the fans going helps them prepare for the next day.
Well, they seem to be enjoying the fact that they just eat.
Yes.
How much milk do they produce typically, and does the heat affect the milk production?
Yes, the heat affects the milk production. What we like to say, these are athletes wearing a fur coat, okay? Mm-hmm. So it's tough on them. We try to keep the conditions right. Milk production goes down, but they're amazing animals. We get about 9-10 gallons of milk on average, but there's cows in this herd making per day per cow. Okay.
And how often are they milked? We have a robotic.
So we have a robotic farm here. Some cows get milked 2 times a day. Some get milked 3. Some get milked 4 in 24 hours. They actually don't sleep very much, and so they're happy to get milked in the middle of the night all night long.
Wow. Okay, Mark Duffy, we'll come back with you here at the Brook Dairy Farm.
Sorry.
Dr. Postel, you heard me say 125 pounds. They eat that much a day. I know for a fact that when you go to the Golden Corral, your limit is about 4 or 5 pounds. Or is it higher? I haven't gotten the official word. Welcome back to the Great Brook Dairy Farm here west of Boston, Massachusetts. We are talking how heat and drought are affecting the cattle. First of all, we discussed already that they have to buy additional food. They have to buy hay because of the lack of being able to cut the hay in the fields. They usually do that 3 or 4 times a year. But we also want to talk about how the heat affects the milking of the cattle. We'll come back in just a few minutes and talk about, let's bring in Tamma Taylor right now. We still have a whole minute to go, and we'll bring you back in the next block. Tamma, tell us a little bit about how the heat affects the milking process and also how much the milk the cattle produce.
Well, the heat does affect the cows. They aren't as spunky because it just brings them down. They give less milk production as a result of that. They drink about 30 to 50 gallons of water a day.
Wow. And we like to get 10 pounds of milk per cow per day.
Yeah, that's ideally what we get. Sometimes we have production up to as much as 13 pounds per day. In the heat like this, they're apt to be down to maybe around 9 pounds, which would be on a day like today.
Okay, Janice, stick with us. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back here to the Great Brook Dairy Farm west of Boston, talk more about the milking process and how the cattle are affected by the heat. Already, the heat index in Boston up in the low 90s, heading to 94 today. Good morning and welcome back to Carlisle, Massachusetts. I'm meteorologist Mike Seidel with the Great Brook Dairy Farm, the closest dairy farm to Boston. We're about 30 miles west and north of Boston, just outside 495. We did get some rain yesterday. They're in a serious drought here. They're in a moderate or severe drought. The eastern part of the state where we are is in a severe drought. Boston's down over 9 inches. Yesterday's rain was spotty. The airport, Logan, officially had 800s. Some areas had over an inch. And today, forget about the rainfall. Increasing chances of rain into the early part of the week. Then finally, it will get cooler. But we're going to be above 90 today, tomorrow, and Monday. And the drought has hurt the agricultural community here at the dairy farm. They've had to supplant what they usually feed the cattle with. They've had to buy hay and other food. We'll talk more about that coming up at the top of the hour. But first, we want to bring Tamma Duffy back in here and talk about the milking and the heat and how that affects the cattle on a day like today and their milk production. We talked about that a little bit earlier.
Right. So on a day like today, the cows are really feeling like us. They're not wanting to give a lot of milk like they normally would, so they're down in production.
And you're talking about 9 gallons versus, say, 10 or 11 gallons?
That's correct.
Let's talk about the milking machine. This is just amazing. You know, back in the day, I've milked a cow. We've all milked a cow, maybe at a farm and home show. But this is the automated milking machine. And tell us about how that works and how often the cattle come in here.
Well, the cow gets milking permission. The computer keeps track of it. And when she's able to go in line, she takes her turn. She enters into the robot. They get a snack of grain while they're in there. And it takes about 7 minutes on the average, to milk a cow.
And we've got one now about ready to go in there. I think the cow and the cattle are kind of interested in the cameras, the people, and the TV lights.
Right, right. Yeah, it's something different for them.
So it'll come in here and it will, right now they're going to come in and it will take care of the udders and make sure they're sufficiently clean.
Right. It cleans the teeth.
Sanitize them.
Yes, cleans the teeth. It washes them, sanitizes them, takes a milk sample.
And 7 minutes is the average, but today we saw the previous cow gave less milk.
Right. So it's a little bit down from 7 minutes. That would be typical.
Now we're waiting for the gate to open. This cow is anxious to get in here. I'm not sure. I guess it'll open. It's
the robotic arm is recalibrating, and the gate hasn't opened yet for her.
Okay.
It should momentarily.
And Molly, we can tell you this goes on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Here comes the gate. The cow will come in and start eating, and then eventually this robotic machine will go in, first sanitize the udders or the shells.
Yeah, the teeth.
The teeth,
yep.
rather. And then the shells will go in and start milking the cow.
Right.
And it's all automated. It's amazing. I mean, it's a lot faster than the good old days, huh?
Oh, yeah, yeah. It's tried and true.
Okay, Molly, automation. It's the sign of technology here on the farm here in Carlisle, Massachusetts this morning.
I will say, Mike, I've learned so much about cows this morning that I didn't know previously, so thank you for that. Well, let's take you from the Northeast to places like the Delta. But first, we want to check in with our very own Mike Seidel, who is in Massachusetts this morning, where it's all about the heat. But, Mike, it's also really about the drought. It's been building in for, the past couple of months.
Yeah, they're in a significant drought. In fact, this part of the state is a severe drought. Want to bring in Mark Duffy from the Great Brook Dairy Farm out here west of Boston. And we've already talked about how you have to supplant your food because of the drought and you get less milk. And speaking of the devil, the milk truck shows up just on time.
Yes, the milk, every 2 days the milk truck comes. He's picking up about 2,000 gallons of milk. He goes around this part of Massachusetts and a little bit of Connecticut to get a full trailer load of milk, take it to the creamery. And this will be made into dairy products, cheese, butter, powder, ice cream blends by Monday.
So on a hot day, how many gallons on average do you produce? Because it's going to be, again today, heat index up near 100 degrees.
Yeah, so we're down to about 1,000 gallons. With, you know, if today was cooler, we'd be 1,300 gallons.
Yeah, and 20-30%.
Yeah.
And you've got cattle out here. Now, why are these cattle out here and not in with all the other dairy cattle?
So feeding cows is our #1 cost of doing business, and these cows are not producing milk right now. They're on what we call a dry period, basically like a vacation. Between offsprings, they get a break, and so they're getting a different diet. Still a lot of byproducts in it.
And a lot of this you have to pay for because of the drought.
Right. Brewer's grain, apple pumice, canola, some purchased hay. So it's affecting us across the entire herd.
Okay. Mark will come back here from the dairy farm. Dr. Postel can tell you what it smells like out here. No, not cow manure. It smells like beer out here because of all the products he has to buy to feed the cattle. That's the ambient smell here on this hot, humid day here in Eastern Mass.
You know, I sort of sense that, Mike. Thank you very much. I smell that also living in Wisconsin for so many years with all the dairy farms around.
And one of those places that has both heat and drought, that's where we find meteorologist Mike Seidel this morning in Carlisle, Massachusetts. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, guys. We are back out here at the Great Brook Dairy Farm, and we've got Mark Duffy once again. And we've talked about the drought, how it's impacting the feed process because you have to go out and buy. You can't produce enough corn and hay on site. So let's talk about what we've got going over there because I mentioned earlier this whole area smells like beer. Why is that?
Well, so we're feeding more byproducts. So we have 300 acres in crops, which typically would provide the forage the animals needed. And so because we're not getting the yield because of the lack of rain, so we're supplementing with more purchased byproducts. So this is brewer's grain. When they make beer, you have spent brewer's grain, and that's what we're feeding here. We're feeding 60,000 pounds of it a week.
So you're getting 30 tons
every week.
Every 7 days. And this comes from Anheuser-Busch, but not from St. Louis,
right?
But from nearby,
from a local brewery
nearby New Hampshire,
right? So everything we do, we're trying to be efficient with the cost of trucking, the cost of moving, and so what we do as farmers is we use local byproducts.
Let's walk up there and give the viewers part their backs. We'll give them a closer shot of the brewer's grain. I keep calling it beer grain, but it's brewer's grain. Right. Close enough.
Yeah.
And that's why we smell. It permeates the atmosphere out here.
That's correct. And we also feed apple pumice too. Okay. Apple pumice keeps better. And so what we've actually done here is we put some salt on it to try and keep it longer. And so, but it is a challenge to feed byproducts. But it's what we have to do in order to stay in business.
Wow. I mean, it smells like
beer. Oh, yeah. And we have to be careful with the cows. So we use a nutritionist because we really got to be careful. You don't want to feed too much. You want to make sure it's a balanced diet, minerals, vitamins. And so, yes, we're feeding purchased hay. We're feeding corn silage, the entire plant that we've raised. We're feeding canola. We're feeding corn. We're feeding hay. So we still have a balanced diet, but we're using more byproducts.
But if we had plenty of rain, would you still get this?
I'd have some of this
for the diet,
but not to this extent.
Right, 30 tons a week.
It's a lot.
Smokes.
Yeah.
Okay, Mark, again, interesting background on how you are surviving through this third drought in 2016. We had some rain yesterday, but out here it was just enough to lay down the dust.
Correct. No, it's very difficult, and of course the cows come first. So the cows get fed, they get fed as much, they get fed a nutritious diet, taking care of cows, making sure we got high quality milk. That's what we do.
Okay, let's go back to Dr. Postel. Boy, I tell you what, we could use some rain, Dr. Postel, in the Northeast. We think about the Southwest in California. We talk about that. all the time, but it's really, really dry up here in the big cities of the Northeast and in the interior.
You are right about that, Mike. You know, I was in the Northeast a couple of weeks ago, spent some time in New Jersey, and I noticed that everything was brown. And I grew up there. I hear your pain, and I understand what's going on there. You're right, Mike. Thank you very much for that reporting.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to the Great Brook Dairy Farm. We're about a half an hour west of Boston. Want to bring in Mark Duffy, who runs the farm, about 200 cattle. It's hot outside, the heat index 95 in here. It doesn't seem so bad with the fans, and the cattle seem to handle this okay.
Right. We do a lot to try and make sure that it's the correct environment for them. And they are adaptable, although they're wearing a fur coat, so it's a challenge we have to work at.
And they don't sweat.
And they basically don't sweat, and so they're on a high plane of nutrition. They really love it when the sun goes down. They have no interest in getting a suntan. They want to be in the shade.
And when it's hot, they do gather together. They like to be in a group.
Yeah, they tend to do that. I mean, you know, they're a herding animal.
We see that during thunderstorms.
Correct, and sometimes it's not good. They're all under the same tree.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
Now let's talk about how the drought is affecting how you feed them, because it's been so dry. You're in a moderate drought, significant drought out here in the eastern, severe drought, I should say, out here in the eastern part of the state. Logan's down over 9 inches of rain this year. So this has affected your corn crop and your hay crop.
Correct.
On site, so you have to make up for that.
Right. I raised about 300 acres of crops, 137 of corn, the rest of hay. Provides the basis of my feeding program. The cows are eating about 125 pounds a day. They get as much to eat as they possibly can. We make sure that they're a nutritionally balanced diet. So because we don't have rain, the crop's not growing. So what we're doing here is we're feeding a lot of byproducts, which we like to do in the dairy industry anyways. Brewer's grain from making beer, apple pumice from making apple juice, hard cider. We're feeding canola from making canola oil. We're feeding minerals, vitamins, balanced diet from our nutritionists. But we're feeding a lot more byproducts.
And you have to pay for this.
And I have to pay for some of those byproducts. And then we're buying hay also that we're not producing. We're buying hay from out of state.
You normally get 4 cuttings of hay?
Yeah, we'd like to get 3-4 cuttings.
So far?
We've gotten 1 cutting, and then there's nothing out there.
It's
nothing.
Just brown.
Right.
And what's the prospects on the corn crop?
Well, the
September,
corn,
October?
yeah, the corn is really, it shrivels up. It's an amazing plant to survive. It shrivels up like it's pineapple, but after a while, it's had enough, and it'll just die on us, and it won't have a proper kernel. It's going to be a real challenging winter.
We've had 3 droughts since 2016 here. How has that affected your water from the well? Any impact so far?
Luckily, we have very good well water. We do have more than one well that we can tap into, so that's key. These cows, when it's hot, nonstop drinking 30, 40, 50 gallons a day per cow.
Oh, so they stay hydrated.
Oh, yes.
50 gallons of water a day.
You know?
Oh, my gosh. And they eat all day, too, so.
Yeah, and of course they're making milk, and they're eating a lot, and they're digesting, and the barn is designed with the proper amount of space for them to drink as much as they want to, stuff like that.
And your milk process, when it's hotter, they don't produce as much milk.
Right, production goes down. You know, in the dairy industry, we've really got a lot of tools. Notice there's no walls on the side. There's an opening in the ceiling. There's some high-tech insulation. There's fans going. The barn's designed with space for the cows. So we've done a lot, although as it gets hotter and hotter, we have to more adapt to, are we going to start farming like we were in Florida, okay? And there's more things that we could add as the temperature keeps increasing.
That costs a lot more money.
That costs a lot more money and uses even more water in a lot of cases.
So the cattle seem to be doing okay today. They're milking over there. We showed the milking machines earlier. Every 7 minutes, a cow goes through, and this is 24/7.
Correct.
And what about at night? You told me earlier cows don't sleep a lot. I haven't seen hardly a few sit down, but they just keep eating.
No, they take little naps during the day. Cows cannot sleep standing up. They take little naps, but they're going 24 hours a day. We milk cows 24 hours a day. There's a little bit of light here at night. Cows can actually see very well in the dark, okay? So the barn is set up so that cows will get milk, cows will eat. We have an automatic machine that pushes the feed to the cows, and we do come out and check on them, or it notifies us. And so, like, I was out here at 11 o'clock last night checking my cows.
So the ideal forecast would be rain for you and cooler weather for everybody, especially the cows.
Correct.
That's what we need.
That's what we need, and the good message, I think, is that there's going to be plenty of dairy products. We find ways to address it. We got a really good team. We got good veterinarians, good nutritionists. That's what we do.
Okay, Mark Duffy, thanks for joining us. We'll come back to the dairy farm on a hot summer day and talk more about how the drought is affecting the milking and the cows.
That's where we find meteorologist Mike Seidel in Carlisle, Massachusetts this morning, learning a lot about dairy and farming and passing on that knowledge to us. Good afternoon, Mike.
Good afternoon, Molly. Back here at the Great Brook Dairy Farm, we've got the guy who runs the place, Mark Duffy. And Mark, right now, it's time to feed them for the second time today, right?
Yeah, second time of a mixed ration. They've gotten hay also, too. So, and then they get grain in the robots also.
And most of what you're throwing out there, dumping out there, you have to buy because of the drought.
Correct, byproducts. It's a mixture of what little we're raising because of the drought and what we're purchasing also.
Show the viewers how this works. Again, they do this 3 times a day, morning, lunchtime, and they'll do another feeding late afternoon. They don't have a feeding overnight, but the cows basically that are producing milk eat constantly, 125 pounds a day. They drink up to 50 gallons of water, and the drought has hit the dairy farmers hard and the other farmers because he's got hundreds of acres of corn and hay. He's only cut the hay once. He should have cut it 2 or 3 times by now, and the corn crop is not looking great. So, again, hot weather, dry weather really impacts the farming community and the dairy farm. We want to thank Mark and Tamma Duffy for inviting us out here to the dairy farm on this hot summer day.